망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
Time to set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty. Korean cultural content is gaining more and more fans worldwide. It's indeed the golden age of K-culture. But with this growing interest comes an increase in misinformation about Korea. There's so much inaccurate information out there. Even AI can sometimes get it wrong. So, we must set things straight and correct all the misinformation. So here's the plan. The Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, VANK, and Arirang TV present the Get Korea Right project. Our goal is to provide accurate information on important keywords that come to mind when we think of Korea. Blatant errors and false claims that distort history. It's time to set the record straight, sharing the true history and culture of Korea while raising the national brand. Let's get started with Get Korea Right. Are you ready to join?
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it It awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
With 15 days to go until the presidential election, the major presidential hopefuls, including the DP's Lee Jae-myung and the PPP's Kim Moon-soo, campaigned in the capital Seoul today, a key battleground. Overseas voting for the 21st presidential election begins tomorrow for a 6-day run in 118 countries around the world. For the first time, voters in Cuba and 3 other countries in Europe will be able to cast their ballots, with diplomatic missions newly added. Korean trade officials are set to travel to Washington as early as tomorrow for negotiations amid the U.S. Treasury chief seemingly putting pressure on other countries, saying tariffs will return to a higher level if they do not negotiate in, quote, good faith. It's May 19th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start our coverage with the campaign trail. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung made stops in busy areas across Seoul today, seeking support from voters of all ages. Our Shin Ha-young reports. The Democratic Party's candidate Lee Jae-myung is back in Seoul and continued his campaign rallies, making stops in busy areas across the city after traveling south last week. He kicked off his Monday campaign by visiting the Korean Senior Citizens Association, where he thanked the older generation for playing a big role in South Korea's growth and asked them to share their wisdom with the younger generation.
After meeting elderly voters, Lee Jae-myung continued his rally at Seoul's busy Yongsan Station Plaza, aiming to reach both younger and older generations to highlight unity across age groups.
Life is tough, isn't it? Things feel unstable. On June 3rd, let's bring this to an end. Let's build a new country together, one where people are truly respected and where peace and stability lead to a better, happier life.
Ahead of the rally on Monday, he addressed real estate issues, saying that he will manage real estate policy by increasing supply when it's lacking, following the basic principle of supply and demand. The Democratic Party is strengthening security for Lee after receiving multiple reports of suspected assassination threats against him. Starting from Monday, Lee began delivering his rally speeches from behind bulletproof glass. This comes as concerns over Lee's safety are growing within the party and among his supporters, especially after he was stabbed in the neck during a visit to Busan in January last year. He has already been wearing a 3-kilogram bulletproof vest while campaigning.
Inequality, polarization, and insurrection have pushed our society into extreme division and conflict, to the point where a presidential candidate now has to wear a bulletproof vest while campaigning.
His camp is also keeping people away from areas near the stage, and he's avoiding physical contact with supporters, such as shaking hands. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News. The People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo had the chance to share his vision for the ROK-U.S. alliance at American Chamber of Commerce in Korea. He also hinted at possibly merging with Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok, who rejected the idea. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
On the campaign trail on Monday, People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo emphasized the ROK-U.S. alliance, saying that he will meet with U.S. President Donald Trump as soon as he's elected amid the ongoing tariff negotiations.
If I'm elected president, I will visit the United States as early as June to hold a prompt summit with President Trump and swiftly resolve issues that are hindering economic cooperation between our two countries.
The comments came during a luncheon with the American Chamber of Commerce in Korea. He added he'll promote Korea-U.S. business cooperation in advanced technology and culture, not just security. Kim also pledged to remove unnecessary regulations to attract more foreign investment. This comes after Kim claimed his DP rival Lee Jae-myung is too pro-China during the first televised debate the night before. In other campaign activities and rallies around Seoul, he also gave pledges to the younger generations on Coming of Age Day, vying to create jobs, expand opportunities, and ease financial burdens related to marriage and housing. Meanwhile, much attention was given to his gesture toward the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok with an idea of conservative and anti-Lee Jae-myung alliance looming over the election scene. The two met at a Seoul City event where Kim apologized for the PPP's past treatment of Lee when he was party chair and praised his debate performance from the night before. During the Amcham talk, Kim also hinted that a merger may be possible.
Things are gradually improving. If you watched the debate yesterday, you would have seen Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok. He used to be our party leader, and now he's out there representing a certain segment. If I can bring together people like him and unify our efforts, I believe we can bring about significant change.
Lee Jun-seok has so far rejected the idea of a merger, and the current polls show that even combined, their ratings trail DP's Lee Jae-myung. But with the election now just 2 weeks away, a last-minute conservative alliance could still shift the race. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Eyes of the voters in the country were on the first televised presidential debate on Sunday night, with clashes on economic and trade policy. And the four debaters on the stage looked as equally focused on controversies surrounding their rivals as addressing ways to tackle economic challenges. Lee Soo-jin fills us in.
Pledging to save Korea from its present economic downturn, the four main presidential candidates held their first televised debate live on Sunday, beginning with the task of improving livelihoods. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung promised big government spending with funding towards debt forgiveness for small business owners, more research and development in AI, and new industries in energy and culture.
We need a supplementary budget as soon as possible, within feasible limits, to revive domestic demand and everyday livelihoods.
The People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo agreed on boosting spending to offer subsidies and debt restructuring for small firms. He pledged to be a jobs president, using regulatory reform to support growth in high-tech sectors.
By eliminating excessive regulations, businesses won't feel forced to move abroad and can confidently operate locally and create jobs.
Reform Party leader Lee Jun-seok opposed reckless injections of money in a time of high inflation and low demand, saying it will hurt, not benefit, small companies. He proposed regional governments set their own minimum wage and focus more on building national competence in sectors critical to economic growth.
To beat China, we need not only an understanding of science and technology, but also competent leadership that can communicate freely with global leaders.
Meanwhile, the Democratic Labor Party's Kwon Young-guk focused on overcoming inequality for workers, farmers, women, and minorities.
A world where you work hard yet remain poor, where you are driven further to the margins. This unequal world must not be left as it is.
With the topic turning to America's tariffs on its trading partners, Lee Jae-myung said negotiations must begin, but Korea must also diversify its export items. He said the door should stay open to Russia and China. Kim Moon-soo promised to hold a summit with U.S. leader Donald Trump and resolve the bilateral issues based on their personal trust. Lee Jun-seok suggested a cool strategic response that highlights South Korea's strength in semiconductors and its value as Washington's long-standing security partner. Kwon Young-guk showed the U.S. a red card and said he will not submit to predatory trade tactics. The two candidates leading the polls face intensive questioning. Lee Jae-myung was under fire over his proposed wind power project largely involving Chinese firms and his alleged affinity with Beijing. He was also grilled on alleged illegal payments made to North Korea during his time as Gyeonggi-do province governor, with the Reform Party candidate suggesting E's plans to legalize domestic spot cryptocurrency ETFs could also potentially fund North Korea. Meanwhile, Kim Moon-soo was strongly criticized for being a part of the impeached Yoon Suk-yeol administration as former labor minister. Lee Jae-myung said Kim should share the blame for the sluggish economy, and Kwon Young-guk slammed Kim's endorsement of allowing extra working hours for semiconductor workers. The next live debate will take place on Friday, focusing on social issues. 이수진, Arirang News.
The 21st presidential election kicks off early for overseas Koreans. Voting for Korean nationals overseas will begin on Tuesday in more than 100 countries around the world. And for the first time, polling stations have been newly established in Cuba, Luxembourg, Lithuania, and Estonia. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Overseas voting for South Korea's 21st presidential election will begin around the world on Tuesday in 118 countries. According to the National Election Commission, overseas ballots for registered voters will be held over 6 days at 182 Korean embassies, consulates, diplomatic missions and offices. Voting hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 41 additional polling stations have been installed, where the number of overseas nationals exceeds 30,000. In the United States, these include the states of New York, California, Massachusetts and Texas, which will open from Thursday to Saturday. Voting booths were also added for the Korean military's Dongmyeong unit in Lebanon and the Hanbit unit in Uganda. Specific locations can be found on consulate websites. Voters must have registered beforehand and bring a government-issued ID, as well as a document to prove they are registered as Korean nationals. These include official documents for visas and permanent residency, which can differ according to the country, so voters must check the requirements on each embassy or consulate website. Also, citizens living abroad who are visiting Korea can join domestic voters at designated polling stations. But first, they must register in person between next Monday and June 3rd at an election office located in the district of their last registered Korean address. In this election, overseas polling stations were newly established for the first time in 4 countries where diplomatic missions were recently opened: Cuba, Luxembourg, Lithuania and Estonia. Over 258,000 are expected to cast overseas votes, 14% more than last year. Overseas ballots are returned to Korea via diplomatic pouches to be counted together with domestic votes after Election Day voting ends. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Korean trade officials are set to travel to Washington this week for talks on tariffs amid the U.S. Treasury chief putting pressure that tariffs will return to a higher level if countries don't reach agreements during the 90-day pause period. Bae Yoon-ji has more.
As South Korea seeks to reach a trade deal with the U.S. by early July, senior officials in Seoul are set to travel to Washington as early as Tuesday for talks on tariffs. This comes after South Korea's finance and trade ministers met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in late April and requested exemptions from higher levies. U.S. President Donald Trump on April 2nd announced a set of reciprocal tariffs on major trading partners, including South Korea, before putting a temporary pause to those levies for 90 days. He said on Friday that time is running out for countries to make trade deals with the United States.
And we have, at the same time, 150 countries that want to make a deal, but you're not able to see that many countries. So at a certain point over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think Scott and Howard will be sending letters out, essentially telling people, it would be very fair, but we'll be telling people what they'll be paying to do business in the United States.
Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Bessent said in an interview with CNN on Sunday that Trump has put countries on notice that if they don't negotiate in good faith, tariffs will soon return to the April 2nd levels. Bessent also noted there are 18 important trading partners that the U.S. is most focused on solidifying deals with, while adding that there are a lot of smaller trading relationships. As the deadline looms, he said Washington may impose some tariffs by region rather than on individual countries. Addressing the concerns on tariff uncertainties, the Korean government earlier explained that this week's consultation will be focused on 6 key areas: balanced trade, non-tariff measures, economic security, digital trade, country of origin, and commercial considerations.
Yeah, so I think that connects to what I really think is the critical thing here, which is the economic security issue. So on that front, the White House would like to kind of get this big headline win on so-called friendshoring semiconductor and battery supply chains. That is, the U.S. kind of wants to have these supply chains run through an allied country like Korea.
With only about 50 days left until the July 8th deadline, when the temporary pause on tariffs is lifted, eyes are now on whether South Korea will be able to make some meaningful progress in this week's talks. 배은지, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, Israel has agreed to the basic flow of food into Gaza amid its launch of a fresh ground offensive against Hamas. Lee Yoon-jin has the latest.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office released a statement on Sunday, which stated that under the recommendation of the Israeli Defense Forces, it would allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza so that a starvation crisis would be avoided, as such a situation would jeopardize the IDF's latest extensive ground operation. It was not immediately clear when or how aid would enter Gaza, but Netanyahu said that Israel would work to ensure Hamas does not take control of the aid. The announcement came after the Israeli military said earlier on Sunday that it had begun extensive ground operations in the northern and southern parts of the enclave, named Operation Gideon's Chariot, including both active duty and reservist troops. The IDF said it would continue to operate against the terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip in order to defend Israeli civilians, having conducted a preliminary wave of intensive airstrikes on more than 670 Hamas targets in Gaza over the past week to support Gideon's Chariot. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry reported significant civilian casualties of more than 400 people in the 4 days since the offensives began last week, including the more than 100 people killed in Gaza on Sunday. Meanwhile, there have been reports that no progress has been made in a new round of indirect talks between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas in Qatar. Netanyahu's office said his negotiating team in Qatar was working to realize every chance for a deal, but its position remained unchanged that fighting would end in exchange for the release of all remaining 58 hostages, the exile of Hamas terrorists from Gaza, and the disarmament of the territory. Hamas has refused to leave Gaza or disarm, as officials from the militant group said it was still proposing the release of all Israeli hostages in return for an end to the war, the pullout of Israeli troops, and an end to a blockade on aid for Gaza, and the release of Palestinian prisoners. Lee Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Pope Leo XIV called for peace and unity at his inaugural Mass, delivering a message that resonated far beyond the Catholic Church. During the service on Sunday at the Vatican, he condemned economic systems that exploit the earth's resources and marginalize the poorest, while also calling for peace in Ukraine and Gaza. Among the tens of thousands gathered for the address were believers and tourists alike, alongside world leaders. Following the Mass, the pontiff held a private meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with baseball. The KBO League has reached yet another attendance milestone.
Yes, 4 million fans in record pace. The KBO announced on Sunday that it had surpassed 4 million in a record 230 games. The previous record was 255 games set in 2012. This is just one of a few milestones already this year. 1, 2 and 3 million were all achieved in record time. And the pace at which KBO went from 3 to 4 million was also a record. 55 games beats the last record by 10. Meanwhile, speaking of records, Hanwha Eagle star Cody Ponce on Saturday in a 1-0 home win over the SSG Landers tied the KBO record for the most strikeouts in a single game with 18, level with Song Dong-yeol of the Haetae Tigers, set on June 19th, 1991.
And moving on to football now, Lee Jae-sung played a big part in his team securing European football for next season.
Yes, he's helped Mainz secure a spot in the UEFA Conference League. Mainz on Saturday earned a 2-2 draw at home to Bayer Leverkusen, with Lee Jae-sung winning a penalty kick for Jonathan Burkhardt to level just after the hour mark. He thought that he'd scored himself at one point, but the goal was disallowed for offside. But the point meant that Mainz finished in 6th place in the Bundesliga, their best finish since 2016. The following season was the last time Mainz played in Europe. Lee Jae-sung scored 7 and laid on 8 assists in 33 league appearances this season, his best return for the club. He joined them in 2021 and has so far played 123 times. His contract, though, is due to expire at the end of next season.
And finally to volleyball, the legend, that is Kim Yeon-kyung, has said goodbye to sport.
Yes, she waved goodbye to the fans at an all-star game on Sunday at the KYK Invitational 2025 All-Star Games Series at Incheon Samsan World Gymnasium this weekend. Kim took part as a player and coach in a 2-game series that on Sunday had Team Star take on Team World. Kim and Team Star won Sunday's match 80-63. The day before, Kim played with the World All-Stars and beat the women's national team 80-59. This past season, Kim and the Hankook Life Insurance Pink Spiders won the regular season and championship titles. This meant that she's won 5 V-Leagues in total and 4 championships. She also played and won trophies in Turkey and Japan and led the national team to the semi-finals of the Olympics in 2012 and 2020.
An incredible career. All right, Paul, thanks for that. See you next time.
Thank you.
Two different skies appear today in the central and southern parts of the country. The center areas are affected by rain clouds from the afternoon, having cloudy skies. The expected rainfall will be up to 20 millimeters in the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province, and up to 10 millimeters in the Chungcheong-do provinces. This rain will mostly stop by early tomorrow morning. A preliminary warning for strong winds is in place. Typhoon-like gusts of more than 50 meters per second will hit the East Sea and the West Coast, and winds of 25 meters per second or more will hit the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province and Gyeongsangbuk-do province until dawn tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Gyeongju will start off at 17 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 16 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 27 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 25 degrees in Jeju. Rain is forecast throughout the east on Wednesday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
해금은 두 줄로 된 현악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyeon. The economy is once again a decisive issue that could sway voter sentiment in South Korea's upcoming presidential election. On May 18th, the four leading candidates, Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party, Kim Won-soo of the People Power Party, Lee Jun-suk of the Reform Party, and Kwon Young-guk of the Democratic Labor Party faced off in their first televised debate. With Korea stuck in a prolonged period of low growth, soaring inequality, and deepening regional disparity, each candidate laid out their vision to revive the everyday economy. So from job creation and fiscal policies to trade and labor reform, the stakes couldn't be higher. Voters are no longer content with slogans. They're demanding realistic and concrete solutions. So on Within the Frame tonight, we break down what each economic pledge really offers, what sets them apart, and how feasible their roadmaps are in confronting the nation's most pressing economic challenges. And for a closer look into this, we are joined by Shin Se-don, Professor of Business Economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Welcome to the program.
Good evening.
And also joining us is Choi Sang-mi, Professor of Business Administration at Ewha Women's University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good evening.
So let's start right away with Professor Shin. So on May 18th, like I've said, the four presidential candidates, Lee Jae-myung of the DP, Kim Won-soo of PPP, and Lee Jun-suk of the Reform Party, and Kwon Young-guk of the Democratic Labor Party faced off in the debate. And the spotlight was on overcoming low growth and jump-starting the everyday economy. I wonder, how would you assess the overall direction of the debate?
Well, they've been talking about a lot of issues, dozens of issues, everyone, which is very important and crucial for economic future and economic development. But unfortunately, I would say it was really difficult to say impressive in the sense that most of them are talking emotionally charged. And in some cases, some discussions have been pretty antagonistic against the other candidate. And most of the answers, were evasive, avoiding the direct answer to, because the issue is so important and so critical. So I think in general, I will say that it was not enough to persuade every voters in the nation to confirm that someone in the candidate group could be hopeful to govern the future administration. So in general, assessment is not quite impressive to my standard, I should say.
It was a little bit more of a emotional and targeting each other right on that point. But yeah, so we want to elaborate on this debate now. So Professor Choi, could you lay down for us what kind of policies the candidates have proposed for solutions to, to revive our economy?
According to their discussion yesterday, that Lee Jae-myung actually focused on boosting demands itself. I think he believes that increasing government spending now will raise household spending and lead to overall growth. So his plan calls for extra budget allocation and large investment in areas like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and cultural industry. And his idea is mainly that these moves will create more jobs and encourage private companies to invest. If you look at Kim Won-soo's plan, he focuses on removing unnecessary regulation. He proposed to set up a regulatory reform commission and Ministry of Regulatory Innovation to review and ease rules and maybe holding back businesses. And his goal is to make it easier for business to operate and grow without increasing government debt. If you look at Lee Jun-suk's plan, he focused on improving productivity. Like he suggests adjusting minimum wage based on local condition. So his approach focused on small investments that add up to a more efficient economy. And lastly, Kwon Young-guk, he focused on tackling inequalities. So Kwon focused on reducing the gap between the rich and the poor. And his plan is to increase taxes on wealthier people instead of cutting taxes for them, aiming to redistribute income more fairly across society.
Right. Professor, thank you so much for clarifying that for us. So it seems like they're agreeing on the problem, but divergence on the cure is evident, and we'll really have to see how they move forward with it, navigate it later on. But now let's get a little bit deeper into the different pledges of these candidates. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung is proposing, like Professor Che has said, he's proposing swift supplementary budgeting paired with long-term investment in AI, renewable energy, and cultural industries as well. But since his strategy depends on aggressive fiscal expansion, some are concerned about the risk of worsening fiscal health. Professor Shin, as an economic expert, what's your evaluation on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, he proposed number of mega projects in the sense that each and every project he mentioned requires tens of trillions of Korean won. So if you add it up, it amounts to almost more than 150 trillion wons. And that is, I think, a tremendous amount of money, and everybody was talking about the supplementary budget of about 13 trillion just passed the Congress a few weeks ago. But according to his plans, I think we have to spend another 100 trillions within this year. And that amounts to about 150 trillion wons, which is about 10% of our national, consumption demand, which is about 1,500 trillion a year. So, yeah, I mean, his plans are pretty audacious in the sense that he wants the government to participate in every aspect of Korean economy to boost Korean economic development. But it requires astronomical amount of money, which we have to ask, where does the money come from? We already, Korean economy is already ridden with the national debt, which is more than 100% of GDP. So Korean government and the Korean nation is incapable of take another big, national debt. So considering the situation, I think Korean government, no matter who becomes the president next time, it's going to be quite restrictive in spending the money. And in that sense, I think it could sound a little irresponsible, to spend an astronomical amount of fiscal money when, Korea is facing another astronomical national debt. So I think it is pretty impossible for the government, no matter who becomes the president, because of the fiscal resources.
Right. So indeed, it was a big, bold bet on the fiscal muscle, though the purpose was, to revive the country. But the source of where you get the budget, it remains a question. Now, let's turn to the People Power Party's candidate, Kim Moon-soo, as well. He's called for sweeping deregulation, including new bodies like a regulatory reform committee and also a ministry for regulatory innovation. Professor Che, is this level of economic restructuring actually necessary to escape the low growth trap?
Yeah, I think so. As you know, the many experts are really worried about our country's slow growth in economy. So as you know, they expect 1.5% expected for 2025 this year. So needs very bold action. So if you look at that, Kim Moon-soo's plan, he focused on cutting red tape So by cutting red tape, business could reduce cost and become more competitive, and this could lead to faster growth without the need for more government spending. Also, fewer regulation might make South Korea more attractive to foreign investors, especially in high-tech areas such as biotech and renewable energy. And unlike adding more spending, easing regulation help growth without increasing the national debt, which is important when the debt level is already very high, like Korea. So, however, it's important to balance these changes with a safeguard to ensure that key rules for safety and fairness remain in place.
Right. So deregulation sounds like a reset button, but on the downside, tearing it down barriers too fast could bring also risks as well. But now let's also turn to Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok. He offered a localized approach, rather, suggesting the minimum wage be adjusted by different regions. It's quite a bold departure from uniform policy. Professor Shin, how realistic do you think and effective could this be for struggling communities as well?
Before mentioning about the minimum wage, I will point out that the PPP is kind of agenda about the regulatory reform commission that is applicable under the premise that the government is the efficient organization, which I don't believe. Korean government, Korean officials in the government could not be efficient enough to lead industry in almost all areas. So just making that kind of a commission, or just making a department, or just making of a ministry, that would not help. That's going to make another trouble in the coming future. So that's one that I want to point it out. And to the candidate Lee Jun-seok's idea of regionally different minimum wage, which is just like what Japan is taking right now. I think it is pretty fascinating idea, because in Korea, even though it's a small economy, population is over 50 million and diverse enough. So if you go outside, if you go to the rural side, the economy is totally different, from what you see in the metropolitan Seoul area. So minimum wage and working condition and every standard of labor has to be differently applied to a different region. In that respect, I think his idea is pretty good, and that's what I have been emphasizing for the last decade so.
So if this is implemented well, then that kind of flexibility could breathe new life into this lagging regions. So execution.
It could solve a lot of problems. It could solve the development of the region. It could solve the lack of job problem. It could solve diminishing rural area. So it could solve many problems with the unequal or different minimum wage according to the geographical region.
So we'll really have to see if the next administration, how this unfolds in the next administration's policies. Now, we'll also touch upon Democratic Labor Party candidate Kwon Young-guk, who's putting weight in inequality, not growth, front and center. He's pushing for wealth redistribution through increased taxes on the rich people's population. Professor Che, how would you assess this equity-focused economic philosophy?
Actually, Kwon's plan is very simple. Instead of giving tax bracket to the rich, he wants to raise taxes on wealth. So this approach is intended to bring about fair income distribution, as you said. So if you look at, but this kind of, a plan have both positive and, possible huge downside. So if you look at the positive effect, a wealth tax can generate extra money for essential services, for government like healthcare and education. Also, when the money is redistributed, people with a lower income often spend more, which can help boost the overall economy. However, if the tax is too high due to the wealth tax, there is a chance that wealthy individuals might move their money or leave the country forever. And high taxes on wealth might discourage people from investing in new and innovative business unless the rules are designed very carefully. So Gon's focus on fairness looks like a very promising, but his plan must be designed to avoid the negative impact, as I mentioned, on investment and innovation and national economic growth.
Right. So redistribution of growth definitely it is a powerful message, especially in this polarized climate. But we'll have to see how the policy actually becomes executed. Now, in labor policy, labor is also a key issue, Professor Che. The fault lines were especially clear in the side. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung supports the yellow envelope law and a 4.5-day work week. And in contrast, People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo wants to reform the 52-hour work week through labor management consensus. How should voters interpret these very contrasting positions?
Actually, the Lee Jae-myung, as he said, he focused on worker protection. So he supports the so-called yellow envelope law, which aims to strengthen workers' rights by ensuring that subcontractors are treated fairly. Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week, is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance with people hope that this will also boost the productivity. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he focused on modifying working hours. So instead of full changes like that of Lee Jae-myung, Kim prefers to adjust the current 52-hour work week rules. He believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes. So, if you look at Lee's plan, create a new set of protection and aim to reduce the work hours as a part of larger social reform. Kim's plan offers for a more gradual changes that hopes to balance the need of both employer and employees, reducing working hours only when it makes sense.
So this really draws the battle lines, workers' rights versus flexibility, and it's a clear window into each party's priorities as well. Now, let's also touch upon trade with the United States. Professor Shin, there's also a split in terms of candidates' priorities. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung says there's no rush to finalize tariff negotiations with Washington, while PPP's Kim Moon-soo insists on wrapping up talks before July 8th. What do you make of this, difference in stance?
I think it is urgent for Korean economy to make negotiations completed as soon as possible, as PPP leader would have suggested. But the problem is that's not determined by our own will. The key is in the hands of the United States. And we know the United States is in trouble because very astronomical tax especially against China, has kind of backfired on economic situation in the United States. Plunging stock markets and skyrocketing prices in the main stores. So I think United States in a hurry to kind of calm down the aftermath of a high tariff. So I think it's a pretty smart move for Korea to wait, not to hurry any kind of early negotiations. In that, I think, respect, I think, Lee Jae-myung's approach, not hurrying, too much, I think is a pretty smart, behavior, considering the situation that America is facing into right now.
Right. So considering the background, wait-and-see approach could be helpful in this current situation. Now, so all in all, Professor Shin, you've mentioned that largely the proposals were kind of vague on funding details, which raises questions about feasibility. So when voters look at the economic pledges from all the parties, Professor Shin, where should they actually place most weight on?
Well, among the unimpressive discussions yesterday, most important issue that was brought up in the discussion is deregulation. I'm not talking about, deregulatory body or commission whatsoever. I think deregulation is crucial for Korean economy. And I think opposition party realizes that, right? So the key issue is whether the parliament, which is taking control of the Congress right now, will agree, right, what the PPP are suggesting in terms of deregulation or, deregulatory bodies. So I think that for the next 6 months after the new administration, everything depends upon how successful Congress and the government comes up with the revolutionary deregulatory kind of a framework. I think that doesn't cost that much, right? So I think all we need is a political consensus. And I think this is very much possible.
Mm-hmm. So whoever wins, whoever takes the next administration, let's really hope for better cooperation with the Congress to move forward with policies that are in strain. Now, we will have to conclude our discussion right here, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for making time for us and giving us your insights tonight, Professor Che and Professor Shin. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.